this presentation only, we need to talk about a particular fish so that people don't get confused and they don't see a number for a feed conversion and sit there thinking this is too low or too high or something. So I've selected just randomly to use as an example the tilapia. And in the presentation I'm going to give, we're going to think about stocking those tilapia fingerlings when they're 50 grams and growing them up to 500 gram average weight. And again, for the purpose of this presentation, we're only going to talk about intensive culture conditions. So that would be intensively stocked ponds, intensively stocked cages, or in the case of the newest technology now, raceways where they're in-pond raceway systems. We're also going to use, and did use in these tests, a 90% satiation feeding technique so that the fish are not getting all they want to eat every day. They're always just a little bit hungry. They could eat a little more feed, but we're not going to give it to them. And the last thing we're going to make the assumption is that there are no water quality issues. There are other things that go on in there that are going to affect feed conversion and mortalities and all that. But we're going to assume for the purposes of this discussion that water quality is perfect. So let's talk about the first one. That's the lowest cost feed. When you go out and buy the cheapest feed that you can find, what you end up with is a feed that has relatively high fiber, because that's the cheapest nutrient, or non-nutrient in this case, that we can put into the feed. Also, it's the lowest protein feed. Protein costs money. The more protein you put in there, the more expensive the feed is going to be. And finally, it has low digestible energy. Between the high fiber levels and using low fat levels and that sort of thing, the energy level is low. Now, I'm not going to say that a low-cost feed cannot be balanced. In fact, it needs to be balanced, otherwise you'll have other problems. But in a balanced, well-formulated, low-cost feed, you're going to get an increased feed conversion ratio. It's like driving your car and pushing your foot on the accelerator. The more gas you give it, the faster it's going to go. And so here we're talking about not giving that car very much gas, so it's going to grow slow and it's going to get a high conversion of feed to fish. The next concept is the lowest cost per kilogram of gain. And as I told you before, this involves not only the feed cost, but also the feed conversion. And finally, we're going to talk about the lowest cost per kilogram of gain. So in this slide, then, what I did, and it's theoretical, these are not fish that are fed. This is strictly a nutrition exercise. But I formulated 5 diets from a high of 44% protein, which no one's going to buy that for their fish, down to a low of 28% protein, which is a fairly common low protein level feed to see in the marketplace. The fat levels in these diets had to vary in order to maintain a consistent digestible energy to digestible protein ratio. I'm sorry, but the pointer just doesn't, it does show up here, but it won't show up on there. So I'll have to say, if you'll follow the line that says DE to DP ratio, you'll see that all of them are approximately 8.2 to 8.4 kilocalories of digestible energy per gram of protein. And that has to be maintained through the exercise, because if you don't, you'll have some energy either going to fat, and in other diets that energy is going to protein, and it throws things off balance for the fish. But I used a theoretical estimator of feed conversion ratio, which nutritionists know that it takes about 4,080 kilocalories of digestible energy to gain 1 kilo of gain. So to calculate what's the theoretical conversion, you divide the digestible energy number into 4,080 kilocalories, and that gives you the estimated FCR. And I've done this a million times, and that procedure is very, very close to the actual values that you obtain. So then if you look at the ingredient cost of each of these feeds, the 44% protein diet obviously has the highest cost, and this is in US dollars per metric ton. You'll see that that highest protein feed costs $656.41 per ton. By the time you get down to the 28% protein diet, it's only $404.25 per ton. And so for most farmers, the tendency is to go for the low gain, and using that theoretical conversion, suddenly you notice that the FCR of the 28% protein feed is higher than the 32, which is higher or approximately the same as the 36% protein feed. And then all of a sudden, the 40% protein starts going up again. So what's happening is, at very high protein levels, you have to buy expensive, high protein ingredients. And suddenly it becomes too expensive to get the nutrients that you want in a balanced formula. On the other end of the equation, the price starts going down, sure enough, but what happens is the FCR goes up so much that suddenly the price per kilo of gain now is climbing all the time. Now, that's not the only thing to consider. Manufacturing costs are a big part of the final sales price of the feed. And when you're looking at how a feed miller comes up with his final price, he has to add manufacturing cost as well as profit and transportation and all those other costs. But his manufacturing costs fall into two categories: variable feed costs, for instance, ingredients, shrinkage, and the profit that he adds. So the higher the cost of the ingredients, those things then impact the final manufacturing cost. But then the second group of costs are fixed. It costs the same amount of money to pellet a 28% protein diet as it does to pellet a 44% protein diet. The numbers are identical. The packaging is identical. So it doesn't matter whether you buy one bag and put 28% protein feed in there, or one bag and put 44% protein in there. Bag cost is the same. And then delivering and handling, maybe it'd be more accurate to call that a semi-variable cost, but it's if you have a set distance from the mill, for instance, let's say it's 20 kilometers from the mill, everybody that's within 20 kilometers of the mill is going to pay the same